Nari's boots hit the cracked surface of Alien with all the grace of a drunken walrus. "Welcome to paradise," she muttered, squinting at the orange dust that immediately assaulted her eyes. The air burned with the scent of something vaguely metallic, or maybe it was just the tang of impending disappointment. Beside her, Raxel was wrestling with the hatch of their decrepit shuttle, the Rust Bucket. It was a name that, if anything, flattered the old hunk of metal. "You know," he grunted, finally slamming it shut with a sound that promised future lawsuits. "I've always wanted to visit a divided hellhole. Dream come true, really," Nari smirked. "I hear they've got a great tourist industry." "Come for the scenery, stay because your ship's been impounded." They trudged away from the shuttle, eyes scanning the desolate plains. Alien was a planet that had seen better days, probably around the time dinosaurs roamed Earth. Now it was a land of fractured alliances and uneasy truces, the perfect setting for an archaeologist with a slightly skewed moral compass and a linguist who considered sarcasm a second language. "You sure this is the place?" Nari asked, her voice skeptical. "As sure as I am that my socks have holes," Raxel replied, fiddling with a battered datapad. "Coordinates match, and the local welcoming committee should be around here somewhere. I think it's under greedy opportunists in the guidebook." Just then, a shadow loomed ahead. A figure emerged through the dust, dressed in armor that had seen more patches than a pirate's eye. The look on his face suggested he was weighing the pros and cons of shooting them. Pros, he'd have 2 less trespassers to deal with. Cons, he'd have to clean up the mess. "This is the part where you tell us we're trespassing on holy ground," Raxel said, crossing his arms, "and then we bribe you to let us pass, or you just take what you want and leave us with our dignity." "Either works for me," the man snorted, lowering his weapon. "I've got more important things to do than deal with 2 lunatics who land in a no-fly zone. But you pay a toll or I report you to the council." "Told you they had a toll booth," Nari whispered, fumbling in her pockets. She produced a handful of credits and tossed them at the man's feet. "Buy yourself something nice." Like a conscience, he picked up the credits, pocketed them without comment, and gestured them along. "Keep your heads down and don't stir trouble. This planet's got enough of that without your help." "Right, because we definitely need help causing trouble," Raxel muttered as they moved past the guard. Alien's capital, if one could call it that without bursting into laughter, was a sprawling mix of ramshackle buildings and disillusioned citizens. The architecture was a testament to the planet's constant state of civil unrest, half-completed structures that looked more like architectural models of insanity. "Our contact should be at some place called the Last Hope," Nari said, glancing at the map on her datapad. "Sounds cozy, or like a bar where dreams go to die," Raxel suggested. "Exactly. Let's hope they've got cheap drinks, because if they do, it might just be the best thing about this planet." The Last Hope was a dingy establishment that had clearly given up on anything resembling health standards. The air inside was thick with the smell of desperation and questionable hygiene. At the back, a table was occupied by a man who looked like he considered personal grooming an optional extra in life. "You Raxel," the man growled, eyeing them with suspicion. "Who's asking?" Raxel replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "Name's Jorek. I hear you're the kind who digs up old junk and pretends it's valuable." "One man's junk is another man's treasure," Nari interjected. "Or in this case, another alien species' heritage," Jorek grunted. "I've got a job for you. Heard you two are good at finding things that don't want to be found." "That's a polite way of putting it," Nari said. "What are we looking for?" "Artifacts. Old tech left by the ancients. Rumor has it they've got a way to erase languages. All of them. Clean slate." Nari's eyebrow arched. "That's one hell of a rumor." "Why erase languages? Control. Rewrite history. Wipe out cultures. Usual megalomaniac stuff," Jorek explained, his tone as nonchalant as if discussing the weather. "And you want us to stop them?" Raxel asked. "Or at least make sure the wrong people don't get their hands on it," Jorek said. "I've got a lead on where the tech might be." "Interested? Could be dangerous," Nari mused. "Or lucrative," Raxel countered. Jorek leaned in, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Find those artifacts and you'll be set for life, or you could just die trying. Either way, it'll be interesting." Nari and Raxel exchanged a glance. It was the kind of opportunity that could put them on every intergalactic watch list, and yet the allure was undeniable. "All right, we're in," Raxel said, sealing their fate with a handshake. "Great," Jorek said, tossing them a data chip. "Coordinates and contacts are all in there. Be careful. Alien's not the kind of place that lets you leave easily." "Trust me," Nari said, pocketing the chip. "We're not here for the hospitality." As they left the Last Hope, the weight of their decision settled over them like the cloud of dust that perpetually hung over Alien. The stakes were high, higher than they'd ever dealt with before, and they both knew the odds were about as good as a snowball's chance in a supernova. "You think we can actually pull this off?" Nari asked as they made their way through the crowded streets. "If not," Raxel replied with a sardonic grin, "at least we'll die interesting deaths." "And isn't that what life's all about?" They walked on, 2 figures in a world that had forgotten what it meant to care. searching for answers that might just spell the end of everything they knew. All in a day's work, Neri and Raxel trudged through the industrial wasteland, a landscape that seemed to have been designed by an artist with a grudge against beauty. Rusted machinery lay scattered like the discarded toys of a long-forgotten civilization, their purpose as mysterious as the reasons behind fashion trends on Earth. Raxel tapped his datapad, frowning at the cracked screen. Either we're on the right track, or this thing's just a very expensive paperweight, he muttered. Given our luck, I'd bet on the paperweight, Neri replied. She kicked a loose bolt, watching it skitter away into the dust. So what's the plan when we find this ancient Etch-a-Sketch? Convince it to play nice, Raxel shrugged, his usual nonchalance firmly in place. Easy. We grab it, avoid getting shot, and live like kings. Or we die in a spectacularly embarrassing fashion. You know, standard Tuesday. Oh, sure. And maybe we'll even get a parade for not destroying the universe, Neri said, her sarcasm as thick as the orange dust coating her boots. Their banter was cut short by a sudden noise, an ominous, low hum that seemed to vibrate through the air. It was the kind of sound that promised nothing good, like a swarm of bees realizing they'd been cheated out of honey. That can't be good, Neri said, eyes narrowing as she scanned the horizon. And here I was thinking we'd get the red carpet treatment, Raxel muttered as he peered at his datapad again. This thing's lighting up like a Christmas tree on steroids. I think we're close. They moved cautiously toward the source of the hum, the landscape gradually shifting from desolate industrial sprawl to something more sinister. The ground here was littered with strange symbols, etched into the dirt by hands long gone. If the terrain before was a testament to neglect, this was a shrine to purposeful abandonment. Feel that? Neri asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The air's different, yeah, it's got that I'm about to die vibe, Raxel quipped. Though it's missing the usual floral notes of incompetence. Up ahead, the outline of a structure loomed, a monolith of forgotten technology. Its surface was covered in alien script, shimmering faintly as if daring them to come closer. Raxel pointed his datapad at it, the device whirring and clicking as it struggled to make sense of something far beyond its design. This is it, he said, awe and trepidation warring in his voice. The ancient's device, Neri stepped forward, eyes locked on the alien monolith. So what do you think it does? Besides the whole language erasure thing, maybe it's a universal translator for the deaf and dumb, Raxel suggested, or a fancy way to tell the universe to shut up. Neri chuckled, though there was little humor in it. If we're lucky, we'll figure it out before it decides to rearrange our DNA into something more abstract. As they approached, the air grew cooler, the hum intensifying until it was a physical presence pressing against their ears. They stopped just short of the device, exchanging a look that spoke volumes more than any sentence could. This was it, the moment when their choices would either make them legends or corpses. Neri reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the monolith. The instant contact was made, the symbols flared to life, casting an eerie glow that bathed the area in a sickly light. Did you mean to do that? Raxel asked, his expression one of resigned bemusement. Nope, but it looks like it wants to talk, Neri replied, yanking her hand back as if scalded. You think it understands sarcasm? Before Raxel could respond, a voice crackled to life. It was a sound that seemed to bypass their ears entirely, resonating directly within their skulls. Identify yourselves. Hello, Neri ventured, glancing at Raxel for support. We're the local neighborhood watch, Raxel added, just making sure all's peaceful and quiet. You know, the usual, the voice ignored his quip, the tone as emotionless as a robot reading a eulogy. You have activated a device of the ancients. State your purpose. Neri hesitated, searching for the words that might keep them alive. We're here to preserve history, she said finally. We want to understand your technology, make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. There was silence, the kind that stretched on uncomfortably long like a bad joke without a punchline. Then the voice spoke again. This device holds the power to erase language, to rewrite the fabric of communication. Why should you be trusted with it? Trust. That's a strong word, Raxel interjected, his sarcasm a thin veneer over genuine curiosity. Maybe we're the wrong people to ask, but we seem to be the only ones here. Neri shot him a glare, but he shrugged unapologetically. Look, if we're honest, we're probably not trustworthy, but the alternative is letting someone who definitely isn't have it, she said. We might be thieves, but we're not monsters. The monolith's symbols flickered uncertainly, as if weighing their words. Very well. Prove yourselves by solving the riddle of language. Only then can you gain control. Before they could respond, the monolith dimmed, the light within retreating until it was just another piece of forgotten debris. The hum faded into silence, leaving them with the daunting task of deciphering what exactly solving the riddle of language meant. Great, Raxel sighed, rubbing his temples. We've been tasked with a cosmic crossword puzzle, and I didn't even bring a pencil. We'll figure it out, Neri said, though her voice lacked conviction. We have to. As they turned away, a shadow moved at the edge of their vision. Instantly, they were on alert, instincts honed by years of survival kicking in. From the dust emerged a group of figures, their silhouettes distinct against the orange haze. They were tall, clad in sleek metallic armor that shimmered like the scales of a dragonfish. Their movements were fluid, purposeful, lacking the awkward swagger of humans. "And who might you be?" Neri called out, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. The lead figure stopped, helmet tilting slightly as if assessing them. "We are the custodians," it said, the voice echoing like gravel sliding down a steel chute. "You trespass on sacred ground. Seems to be a popular theme today," Raxel muttered under his breath. "We seek the device," the custodian continued, ignoring the remark. "Its power is not for such as you, and we seek a quiet life and a decent meal," Neri shot back. "But here we are anyway." The custodian's helmet tilted again, a gesture that might have been amusement or irritation. Hard to tell with aliens. "Leave and we will forget this encounter." "Tempting," Raxel said, "but we're not known for making good life choices." The custodians shifted, an unspoken command passing through their ranks. It was clear they weren't in the mood for negotiation. Neri's hand drifted to her side, fingers brushing the hilt of a dagger. Raxel, meanwhile, focused on the datapad, desperately searching for anything that might give them an edge. "Look," Neri said, attempting a smile that was more defiant than friendly, "we're all here for the same reason. But maybe there's a peaceful way to resolve this." "Peaceful?" Raxel snorted. "On alien, sure, and maybe pigs fly here too." The custodian leader raised a hand, stopping just short of what promised to be an unpleasant outcome. "You claim to seek the device for peace. Prove it." Neri hesitated, caught in a dilemma as old as humanity itself. Trust the beings that could probably vaporize them without breaking a sweat, or gamble on their own abilities to outsmart a piece of alien tech and its equally alien defenders. "Fine," she said, stepping forward. "We'll prove it. But we're going to need a little faith on your part." The custodian considered this, the metallic sheen of its armor reflecting the dying light of the alien sun. Finally, it nodded once, a slow, deliberate motion. "Very well, but know this, any deception and our patience will end." Raxel gave a low whistle. "Sweet. Nothing like a little motivational threat to keep the day interesting." With the custodians watching their every move, Neri and Raxel approached the monolith once more. It seemed to pulse in response to their presence, as if recognizing them, or deciding they were worth the trouble. "Ready to solve the cosmic crossword?" Neri asked, giving Raxel a sideways glance. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, rolling his shoulders. "Let's just hope the aliens don't have a pop quiz afterwards." Together they stood before the monolith, the weight of expectation, both from the device and their alien audience, pressing down on them with all the subtlety of a collapsing star. Whatever happened next, it was bound to be interesting. So they did the only thing they could. They took a deep breath, braced themselves for the unknown, and stepped into the metaphorical abyss. Neri and Raxel found themselves once again staring at the monolith, this time with the added pressure of a group of alien fashionistas watching them like a high-stakes poker game unfolding at a funeral. It wasn't a comforting thought, but then comfort wasn't exactly Alien's specialty. So Neri said, trying a casual lean against the monolith that mostly failed due to its utter lack of warmth. "Any bright ideas on how to solve this riddle of language thing?" Raxel fiddled with his datapad, the screen flickering like an old man trying to keep his eyes open during a particularly dull sermon. "I'm about as bright as a black hole today, but hey, maybe the monolith likes my charming banter." Worth a shot, the custodians remained silent, their presence a constant reminder that failure wasn't just an option, it was the leading contender. "We need help," Neri muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "Somehow, we've got to get the rest of Alien's charming inhabitants to play nice." "Right," Raxel said, his thumb tapping a rhythm on the datapad. "Because nothing screams good idea like rounding up the local tribes who hate each other's guts. It's like herding cats that are on fire." Neri ignored the sarcasm. It was her usual melody anyway. "We need to make a plan. Find the factions that might not shoot us on sight. I'm thinking the Traders Guild might at least listen. They love anything that can't be readily priced." "And the Miners' Union," Raxel added. "They're always game for a bit of rebellion, as long as they can grumble about it afterward." "Sure, and let's not forget the tech cultists," Neri mused. "If anyone can talk to a machine, it's those fanatics, even if they'd probably rather marry the damn thing." "Great," Raxel said, pushing off the monolith and turning to face the custodians. "Looks like we're off to unite the most dysfunctional family reunion in the galaxy." "Wish us luck," the custodian leader tilted its head again, a gesture that might have been an alien shrug. "Your choices are your own, but remember, failure has consequences." With that cheerful thought in mind, Neri and Raxel trudged back toward their trusty shuttle, the Rust Bucket, or as they liked to call it, the vehicular equivalent of a death wish. As they stepped inside, the familiar scent of burnt wiring greeted them. "Home sweet home," Raxel quipped, plopping into the pilot's seat. "Let's hope she doesn't decide to explode today." Neri slid into the co-pilot's seat, flicking switches with the practiced ease of someone who knew the consequences of a casual mistake. "Come on, girl," she murmured, patting the console. "Just get us there." No fancy tricks, no sudden deaths. The engines groaned to life, a sound somewhere between a dying whale and a protest march. Somehow the rust bucket lifted off and they soared, or rather wobbled, into the dusty orange sky of Alien. First stop, the Traders Guild, where the art of negotiation and backstabbing was an Olympic sport. As they landed outside the guild's headquarters, an imposing structure that looked like it had been cobbled together from abandoned ships and wishful thinking, Neri took a deep breath. "Here we go," she said, tugging at her jacket. Time to charm the uncharmable. Inside, the Traders Guild was a chaotic mess of commerce and thinly veiled threats. The atmosphere was thick with the smell of questionable deals and even more questionable hygiene. Neri and Raxel made their way to the central chambers, where the guild's leader, a rotund man named Grizek, sat like a bloated spider in the center of his web. "Ah, Neri Raxel," Grizek said, his voice oozing false warmth. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Grizek," Neri said, forcing a smile, "we need your help. There's something big going down with the Ancient's device." Grizek's beady eyes sparkled with interest, and perhaps a touch of greed. "The Ancients, you say? Fascinating. And what makes you think the Traders Guild would be interested?" "Because whoever controls the device controls communication," Raxel interjected, leaning against the wall with affected nonchalance. "That's a commodity even you can't ignore." Grizek stroked his chin thoughtfully, a gesture that seemed to require his entire arm. True, but what do you want from us?" "Support," Neri replied. "We need to rally everyone who has a stake in keeping Alien from becoming a silent wasteland. That includes traders who like, trading." Grizek chuckled, a sound like a snake choking on a rat. "All right, consider me intrigued. I'll see what I can do, but I expect to be informed if things start to smell like profit. Wouldn't dream of leaving you out when it comes to smelling money," Raxel said, flashing a grin that could cut glass. With a tentative agreement from the Traders Guild, Neri and Raxel moved on to their next stop, the Miners' Union. Unlike the opulent-stinged grime of the traders, the miners' headquarters was all rough edges and rougher people, just the kind of folk who appreciated a good grudge match. The union leader, Gorem, was as sturdy and immovable as the rocks he dug, and about as pleasant to converse with. "Neri, Raxel," Gorem grunted, looking up from a seismic report as if they'd just interrupted his favorite opera. "What brings you to my cave?" "We need allies," Neri said, skipping pleasantries. "The custodians are interested in the Ancient's device. We figure you'd rather have a say than let them call the shots." Gorem eyed them with the kind of skepticism usually reserved for politicians and snake oil salesmen. "And why should the Miners' Union care? Because if the custodians take control, what's stopping them from cutting you off from the markets or the supplies?" Raxel said. "You can't mine if you're stuck in the dark." Gorem grunted again, which was as close as he got to expressing interest. "All right, we'll lend an ear. But don't expect us to play nice just because you ask." "Never crossed our minds," Neri assured him, knowing full well the miners were more likely to punch out a problem than talk it through. With two factions tentatively on board, it was time for the wild card, the tech cultists. Their enclave was an unsettling place, full of whirring gadgets and fanatic chanting that probably translated to "All hail the motherboard." The cult's leader, Sikar, had the glazed eyes of a man who'd stared too long into the abyss and found it immensely entertaining. "Friends, welcome," Sikar said, his voice like a preacher hawking salvation at half price. "Do you come seeking enlightenment? Or perhaps an upgrade?" "Neither," Neri replied, stepping carefully over a pile of circuit boards. "We need your help with the Ancient's device. It's attracting some unwanted attention." Sikar's eyes gleamed with a light that was either divine or dangerous. "The device speaks, does it not? We must understand its voice. This is the will of the machine." "Right," Raxel said, nodding like he understood a word of that. "And to do that, we need to make sure the custodians don't get their hands, or whatever they have, on it first." Sikar nodded, his enthusiasm bubbling up like a malfunctioning coffee pot. "We shall assist. The machine's wisdom must be protected." With the cultists' agreement, Neri and Raxel left the enclave, a sense of uneasy accomplishment in their wake. The factions were as united as they were ever going to be, which was to say, they were mostly not at each other's throats. "All right," Neri said as they walked back to the rust bucket. "Now we just have to keep this alliance from falling apart long enough to figure out what the hell to do with the monolith." "Sure," Raxel replied. "Easy as pie." "If by pie you mean the most explosive dessert known to man." On board the shuttle, the communications panel beeped, a rare occurrence that indicated someone had something important or catastrophic to share. Given their track record, Neri guessed the latter. The face that appeared on the screen was that of a woman with high cheekbones and eyes that could cut glass. It was Dahlia, a representative from one of the more obscure factions, the Shadows of the Dust, a secretive group with a penchant for knowing more than was healthy for anyone's lifespan. Nary Raxel, she greeted them with a nod that bordered on civil. I hear you're playing diplomat. How's that working for you? Like trying to juggle knives in zero-G, Nary replied. You have something for us, or are you just checking in for the fun of it? The custodians are moving, Dahlia said, her expression as unreadable as her intentions. They've got plans and they're not waiting for you to catch up. Great, Raxel muttered. It's always nice to hear we're behind the 8 ball. What's the plan then? Nary asked, eyes narrowing as she considered their options. There's a passage, Dahlia said, her voice dropping to a whisper even though the connection was secure. It leads to the core of Alien. That's where the true device is hidden. The core, Raxel echoed, eyebrows shooting up. As in, the center of the planet. You're joking. Do I look like someone who jokes? Dahlia retorted, arching an eyebrow. Point taken, Nary said, rubbing her temples. How do we get there? I'll send the coordinates, Dahlia promised. But you'd better hurry. The custodians won't wait for a second invitation. The screen blinked off, leaving Nary and Raxel to process this new development. A device hidden at the core of a fractured planet, alien babysitters breathing down their necks, and an alliance held together by duct tape and optimism. Well, Raxel said, trying and failing to sound cheerful. At least it's never boring. No, Nary agreed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. But it sure as hell is complicated. Their path was set, for better or worse. Now all they had to do was convince the rest of Alien that unity wasn't just a pipe dream, and maybe, just maybe, solve a cosmic crossword puzzle along the way. The rust bucket groaned its way into the air, carrying them toward a future as uncertain as a dice roll in a crooked game. Whatever awaited them in the core, it couldn't be worse than what they left behind. Could it? The rust bucket's engines sputtered into life once more, sounding like they'd gargled a box of nails for breakfast. The cockpit vibrated with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for a condemned man on his way to a gallows. Nary and Raxel were strapped in, staring at the console like a pair of gamblers who just realized they bet the farm on a 3-legged horse. Experimental drilling technology, Raxel muttered, poking at the datapad with a finger that had seen better days, maybe a decade ago. That phrase alone is a funeral waiting to happen. Remind me why we're doing this again. Because we're suicidal maniacs with a fondness for hopeless causes, Nary replied, flipping a switch that set off a series of groaning protests from the ship's innards. And because if we don't stop the custodians, we'll be the proud owners of a planet-sized paperweight. Oh right, Raxel nodded sagely, saving the world. My favorite hobby. As they broke through Alien's toxic atmosphere, a view sprawled before them that was as inspiring as a slap in the face. The industrial wasteland stretched out in every direction, a dying beast of rusted machinery and forgotten dreams. Below them, the symbols, cryptic, enigmatic, and probably snickering at their misfortune, glowed faintly in the dim light, like a puzzle taunting them with its unsolved mysteries. Raxel squinted at the datapad. Coordinates from Dahlia are in. Looks like we're headed for. Wait, seriously, that can't be right. What? Nary asked, her tone wary. She's sending us to a place called the Navel of the World. Sounds like a spa or a bad tourist trap, Raxel replied, rolling his eyes. Let's just hope it doesn't come with a gift shop, Nary sighed. Engaging the drill now. With the elegant subtlety of a sledgehammer, the rust bucket began its descent, the experimental drilling apparatus extending from the belly of the ship with all the grace of an inebriated dancer. The ground shook as the drill bit into the surface, sending up clouds of dust that swirled in the air like a caffeinated ghost. Well, there goes any chance of a stealth approach, Raxel said, watching the seismic activity on the datapad spike like a caffeinated teenager's heart rate. Stealth is overrated, Nary retorted. Besides, it's hard to keep a low profile when you're digging a hole to the center of the planet. The custodians, ever the overzealous party crashers, apparently agreed. As the drill chewed through layers of rock and debris, a series of metallic clangs echoed ominously through the ship, a sound that usually preceded trouble of the kiss-your-ass-goodbye variety. We've got company, Raxel announced, checking the scanner. 304 crafts inbound, and they look like they're not here to sell cookies. Time for Plan B then, Nary said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Plan B? Raxel echoed, raising an eyebrow. Since when do we have a Plan B? We don't. But improvisation is the spice of life, Nary replied, fingers flying over the controls. Get ready to make some new friends. As the custodians' ships closed in, the rust bucket's onboard defenses, such as they were whirred into action. A turret that had seen better days swiveled into position, spewing a volley of energy bolts with the accuracy of a drunken sniper. Well, at least we're keeping them on their toes, Raxel said, watching the chaos unfold on the monitor. More like keeping them mildly annoyed, Nary said, gritting her teeth as she maneuvered the ship through a barrage of incoming fire. Hold on, I'm going to try something stupid. Stupid is our middle name, Raxel agreed, bracing himself as Neri threw the rust bucket into a desperate dive, skimming dangerously close to the surface of the wasteland. The custodians, apparently unused to such reckless maneuvers, or maybe just baffled by the suicidal antics, struggled to adjust their trajectory. As they did, Neri activated the rust bucket's rear thrusters, unleashing a plume of debris and heated vapor that engulfed their pursuers. "Eat my dust, you metallic bastards," Raxel crowed, watching the custodian ships veer off course. "Now back to digging," Neri said, focusing on the task at hand as the drill continued its relentless descent into the planet's depths. With each passing minute, the air grew thicker, the pressure rising as they approached the navel of the world. The ship's creaks and groans intensified, protesting the strain with the tenacity of a hypochondriac at a medical convention. "You know," Raxel said, glancing at the datapad, "this might be a really dumb time to wonder if we're going to find anything down there besides molten rock and instant death." "Probably," Neri replied, "but it's not like we have a lot of other options." As if to punctuate her point, the communications panel crackled to life once more. This time, the face staring back at them was that of Siccar, the tech cultist leader, his expression as serene as a monk on a meditation retreat. "Greetings, travelers," Siccar intoned, as if he weren't calling them in the middle of a crisis. "The machine sings. Its voice is loud, clear." "Great," Raxel muttered. "At least someone's enjoying the music. What do you need, Siccar?" Neri asked, trying to keep the impatience from her voice. "Be wary, friends," Siccar replied. "The custodians seek to silence the song. They will stop at nothing to prevent the awakening." "Yeah, we noticed," Neri said. "Any chance you can lend a hand? Assistance is forthcoming," Siccar promised. "The machine wills it. Well, I guess that's better than nothing," Raxel shrugged as the connection cut off. Down they went, deeper into the planet's crust, the atmosphere around them growing heavier, each breath a laborious task. The ship's systems were straining, the hull vibrating with the effort of maintaining structural integrity against the increasing pressure. And then, as if the universe had decided that they'd had enough fun for one day, the drill punched through the final layer. Beneath them lay a cavern, vast and glowing with an eerie luminescence that defied description. At the center, a monolithic structure stood, ancient and imposing, its surface inscribed with the same symbols that decorated the wasteland above. "Well, I'll be damned," Raxel breathed, staring at the monolith. "We made it," Neri said, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Now what?" Raxel asked. Neri considered for a moment, eyes fixed on the monolith. "Now we figure out how to talk to it before the custodians turn us into space dust." With the rust bucket nestled in the cavern like a particularly inelegant egg in its nest, the pair disembarked, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air was thick with anticipation and something else, something that felt like the crackle of energy before a lightning strike. "So how do we start this conversation?" Raxel asked, eyeing the monolith with the suspicion of a man who had been burned by optimism one too many times. "That's the million-credit question," Neri admitted, approaching the monolith with a mix of curiosity and caution. They circled the monolith, searching for anything that resembled a control panel or an interface. But the surface was smooth, the symbols inscrutable, offering no clues to outsiders. Neri sighed, frustration building. "It has to be something simple, something we're missing," Raxel snorted. "Simple, right, because ancient alien tech is always laid out in big bold letters." "Maybe we're overthinking it," Neri suggested. "Maybe the answer isn't in what we see, but how we see it. Like a cosmic magic eye puzzle," Raxel quipped. "Fantastic, just what I needed." But Neri wasn't listening. She closed her eyes, letting the hum of the monolith wash over her, feeling the vibrations through her bones. And then an idea sparked, a connection forming in the recesses of her mind. Raxel watched her, skeptical but hopeful. "You got something?" "Maybe," Neri replied, opening her eyes. "We need the signals from the symbols above. They're like keys resonating with the monolith. How do we get them down here?" Raxel asked, brow furrowing. "Siccar," Neri said, a plan forming. "If he can amplify the signals, we might be able to trigger something." "And if we can't?" Raxel asked, though he already knew the answer. Neri shrugged, a wry grin on her lips. "Then we go out in a blaze of glory and hope someone writes a lousy song about us." "Good enough for me," Raxel replied, reaching for the comms. "Let's call our favorite cultist and see if he's up for duet." As Raxel contacted Siccar, Neri surveyed the monolith, a strange sort of optimism rising within her. They were on the verge of something monumental, even if it was likely to blow up in their faces. In the endless void of space, that was about as good as you could hope for. The cavern surrounding Neri and Raxel felt like the inside of a derelict cathedral, all stone and shadows, but with none of the piety. The oppressive atmosphere clung to them like a damp blanket, complete with the musty aroma of ancient secrets, and perhaps ancient failures. Raxel was fiddling with the comms, trying to rouse their techno-shaman pal Siccar, who seemed to enjoy calling them at the most inopportune moments, like a telemarketer with a prayer wheel. A low hum resonated from the monolith, combining with the ship's groans to form a symphony of impending doom. "Sikar, here," came the eventual reply, the voice as calm as if it were discussing the weather, which was fair because in space the weather was always terrible. The machine's song grows faint. "The custodians interfere, you don't say," Raxel replied, sarcasm dripping from his words like battery acid. "We noticed when they tried to turn us into a new crater. Can you boost the signals from those symbols up top?" Neri asked, cutting through the pleasantries with the subtlety of a chainsaw through a library. Sikar paused, likely consulting whatever incomprehensible data his cultists revered. "Possible but unstable. The machine whispers of great risk." "Fantastic," Raxel muttered, running a hand through his already tousled hair. "Well, we're kind of fresh out of other options, unless the monolith's got Wi-Fi." Meanwhile, the rust bucket sat parked like an old dog that had seen too many winters. The ship was doing its best impression of a decrepit leisure vehicle, just enough to keep them from dying immediately, but not much more. Its systems flashed warnings that seemed to say, "Hey buddy, you should have taken the warranty," Neri sighed, stepping away from the comms to inspect the monolith more closely. The symbols were glowing faintly, mocking her with their aloofness. She ran her fingers over them, trying to make sense of the language. Maybe if she stared hard enough, the secrets would just spill out like a drunk at last call. "Got something?" Raxel asked, hope tinged with skepticism. "Maybe," Neri replied. "Feels more like the universe's worst crossword puzzle." Raxel snorted. "Yeah, and the clue is something cryptic like your inevitable doom. 4 letters. The dim light caught Neri's eye as she squinted at the symbols. These weren't just random scribbles, they had a rhythm and order. Her time as an amateur linguist, thanks to a long love affair with alien crossword puzzles and her rust bucket of a library, was about to pay off, or kill them faster. Hard to say. Raxel grabbed the datapad Neri instructed, a plan unfurling. "I need to see if there's a pattern here." Raxel complied, tapping the screen with the enthusiasm of a teenager presented with a pop quiz. "Sure, why not? If we're going out, might as well be baffled." As the datapad hummed to life, displaying a digital rendering of the symbols, Neri studied the lines and curves with a furrowed brow. It was like trying to decipher the ramblings of a sleep-deprived philosopher. Vaguely coherent, but mostly gibberish. "Think it's some kind of code?" Raxel asked, peering over her shoulder. "Could be," Neri replied, chewing her lip thoughtfully. "Or a really elaborate do not disturb sign." Just then, the rust bucket's alarms blared to life, a sound that was as welcome as a chainsaw at a poetry reading. The comms crackled with static, Sikar's voice breaking through in fragmented bursts. "Machine sings, but beware custodians." The message cut out, replaced by the ominous hum of the monolith, which was growing louder, a low rumble that vibrated through their bones like a bad bass line in a dive bar. "Not reassuring," Raxel commented, eyeing the flickering lights of the rust bucket's control panel. "It's like this thing's trying to tell us something." "Yes," Neri said, eyeing the monolith. "Probably get lost in a language we don't speak." The pressure in the cavern seemed to increase, the air thickening as if the planet itself was holding its breath. A sound, distant yet approaching, echoed through the stone, like thunder but angrier. The kind of noise that usually preceded an avalanche or a bad breakup. "We might need to hunker down," Raxel advised, glancing up at the ceiling as if expecting it to cave in. "Yeah, no kidding," Neri agreed, her gaze fixed on the monolith. "But first we have to figure out how to unlock this thing." The datapad beeped, the screen flashing with new information. Neri's eyes widened as she studied the patterns, connections forming in her mind like a spider spinning a web. "Raxel, look at this," she said, pointing at the screen. "These symbols, they're linked. They react to sound frequencies." "You mean like a musical lock?" Raxel asked, blinking in surprise. "Sort of," Neri replied. "If we can match the right frequencies to these symbols, it might trigger something." "Great," Raxel said dryly. "And here I thought the piano lessons wouldn't pay off." The rust bucket groaned as if offering its own resigned applause. Above them, the distant rumble grew louder, the custodians clearly not taking their time with afternoon tea. "We better work fast," Neri said, determination hardening her voice. "Raxel, boost the thruster output to create a frequency pulse." "I'll tweak the harmonics." "Right, because I've got nothing better to do," Raxel shot back, though he moved quickly to obey, his fingers flying over the controls. As the thrusters fired, the chamber filled with a resonant hum that shook dust from the ceiling. The monolith responded, the symbols flaring brightly, casting eerie shadows as if a ghostly light show was underway. Neri adjusted the modulation, her heart pounding in time with the rhythmic pulses. The symbols shimmered, resonating with the ship's frequencies like a cosmic tuning fork. "Come on, you ancient bastard," she muttered under her breath, coaxing the monolith like a recalcitrant mule. The custodian's presence loomed large in her mind, a ticking clock counting down to their inevitable demise. but in that moment desperation turned to resolve. If they were going down, they'd go down swinging. The monolith responded, a deep vibration emanating from its core, harmonizing with the thruster's output. The symbols glowed in sequence, a pattern emerging like a forgotten melody remembered in snatches. Holy shit, Raxel breathed, watching the display. It's working, Neri barely dared to hope, her focus unyielding as she nudged the frequencies higher, matching the monolith's tempo. The air trembled, the sound filling the cavern like a symphony of chaos and creation. But just as the melody reached its crescendo, the custodians made their move. The ship's sensors screamed with alarm as an energy surge pulsed through the cavern, a wave of raw power unleashed by their unseen adversaries. Brace yourself, Neri shouted, gripping the controls as the rust bucket shuddered, its systems blinking in protest. The wave hit them like a battering ram, the ship bucking wildly. The monolith flickered, its symbols dimming, the song faltering under the onslaught. We're losing it, Raxel yelled, fighting to stabilize the thruster output. Neri's mind raced, desperation fueling her resolve. The custodians were playing hardball, but that didn't mean they were unbeatable. Not if she had anything to say about it. Switch to manual override, she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of defiance. Raxel complied, his hands a blur as he rerouted power, bypassing the damaged systems. The rust bucket's engines roared, a guttural scream of defiance in the face of annihilation. The monolith responded, the symbols flaring brilliantly, its song rising once more. The cavern pulsed with energy, a living entity awakening from its slumber. But the custodians weren't done. Another surge, stronger this time, crashed against them, a relentless tide seeking to drown their hopes. Damn it, Neri cursed, her frustration boiling over. They're not gonna let up. Raxel gritted his teeth, his fingers dancing over the controls. Then we give them something else to think about. The rust bucket systems whirred into action, the ship's hull vibrating with renewed vigor. The experimental drilling tech, meant to crack open planets, not custodians, was redirected, aiming its raw power at their pursuers. Eat this, Raxel growled, a feral grin on his face as he unleashed the energy pulse. The wave of force erupted from the ship, a blast of energy that surged through the cavern, its fury aimed squarely at the custodian interference. The cavern shook, the air crackling with electricity as the energy collided with the custodian's efforts. For a heart-stopping moment, silence reigned. The monolith held its breath, the symbols frozen in luminescent anticipation. Then, like a dam breaking, the symbols blazed to life, the song resuming with a triumphant crescendo that filled the cavern, reverberating through stone and steel. We did it, Raxel whooped, adrenaline surging through his veins. Neri allowed herself a small, triumphant smile, though the battle was far from over. They'd bought themselves time, but the custodians weren't defeated. Not yet. As the monolith's song filled the cavern, Neri and Raxel stood side by side, their resolve unbroken, their determination renewed. In the grand scheme of things, they were but two against an indifferent universe, but they were human, flawed, stubborn, irreverent, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Now what? Raxel asked, glancing at Neri. Now, she said, her voice steady, we make sure this thing doesn't just play the hits. They had a long road ahead, but as the monolith's song echoed around them, they knew one thing for certain. The custodians had picked the wrong planet to mess with, and they'd picked the wrong humans to underestimate. Neri rubbed her temples, the monolith's song reverberating through her skull like a hangover that just wouldn't quit. So, Raxel, got any bright ideas, or are we just gonna let that thing play its greatest hits until we're dust? Raxel, ever the picture of casual despair, scratched his head. I'm thinking on it, but my brain keeps suggesting run and maybe cry a little. He squinted at the monolith, trying to seem more competent than he felt. Let's hope Sikaar has some insight before we're toast. Their comms crackled, carrying Sikaar's voice like a tinny ghost. Power core can repurpose for Earth's benefit custodian defense. Neri leapt on the transmission like a starving dog on a bone. Sikaar, you're breaking up worse than my last relationship. Power core, Earth's benefit. What's the play? Device can store safeguard languages, but custodians guard what? Raxel yelled at the comms. They're antique alien teachotchks. Come on, Sikaar, throw us a bone, will ya? The comms fizzled out with a sad little whimper, leaving them with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear, the monolith could be more than just a cosmic DJ booth. It could preserve Earth's languages. And with the way humans were mucking things up back home, that might be worth a shot. All right, Neri said, determination hardening her tone like a well-practiced lie. We need to get past whatever defense system those custodian jerks have in place. Great, Raxel muttered. And here I was hoping for a quiet afternoon of not dying. The cavern rumbled ominously, as if the universe itself was chuckling at their predicament. Neri ignored it, instead focusing on the datapad, scanning for any hint of what they might be up against. Raxel, meanwhile, toggled switches on the rust bucket's console, his face a mask of concentration and mild panic. If we're gonna poke the bear, we better make damn sure we've got a stick long enough. Sure, just let me check under the seats for a miracle, Neri shot back, sarcasm coating her words like cheap varnish. We've got to figure out how to redirect the monolith's energy to get the defense systems to back off. The monolith, meanwhile, continued its eerie humming, a sound that by now seemed almost taunting. Neri imagined it was laughing at their pitiful attempts to outsmart it, like a cat toying with a pair of clueless mice. Think we can outsmart this thing? Raxel asked, a hint of hope tinged with doubt. Neri shrugged, fiddling with the datapad like it held the secrets to the universe. We've made it this far. Might as well pretend we know what we're doing. Their banter was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a pulsing light beneath the monolith. It flickered, casting ghostly shadows that danced across the cavern walls. The air thrummed with tension, a thin veneer that felt ready to shatter at the slightest provocation. Neri, Raxel said, swallowing hard. I think we just rang the doorbell. About damn time, Neri replied, though her bravado was more for show than anything else. She tapped the datapad again, running calculations that might as well have been ancient hieroglyphics for all the good they did. The light beneath the monolith intensified, coalescing into a shimmering field that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Neri's heart pounded against her ribs, each beat a reminder of how much was riding on their success or lack thereof. All right, let's give this a shot, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. If we can sync the frequencies, we might be able to overload their defenses. And if we can't, Raxel asked, though he already knew the answer. It wasn't like they had many options. Then we get to find out if the afterlife is as overrated as the brochures make it seem, Neri replied, flashing a grin that was more desperation than humor. Working together, they adjusted the thruster output, the ship's systems groaning in protest as they rerouted power to the monolith. The room vibrated, the air thick with potential energy and the ever-present threat of disaster. The custodian's defense grid responded instantly, a web of energy manifesting in the cavern like a shimmering net. It crackled with menace, each line a promise of destruction if they stepped out of line. Looks like we've got their attention, Raxel commented, eyes fixed on the flashing lights. Hope you've got a plan B, Neri snorted. Plan B is to hope plan A doesn't suck. As they worked, the datapad's screen flickered, new data scrolling across it faster than they could process. The symbols on the monolith glowed in response, their patterns shifting like a puzzle being solved on its own. Raxel, check this out, Neri said, pointing at the screen. The symbols, they're adapting to our frequencies. You mean we're actually getting somewhere? Raxel asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. It's a miracle, Neri said, though the word felt foreign on her tongue. Now let's see if we can push it. They adjusted the modulation again, the thrusters screaming as they pushed the rust bucket to its limits. The monolith responded, its symbols flaring with an intensity that bordered on blinding. The custodian net shimmered, the lines wavering as if unsure whether to hold or collapse. Neri's heart leapt at the sight, hope flaring bright and fierce within her chest. They were close, so close she could taste it, but the custodians weren't about to let them waltz through without a fight. The energy grid surged, lines of power snapping back into place with renewed vigor. It was a standoff, a stalemate that could shatter at any moment. Damn it, Raxel cursed, frustration etched across his features. We're not going to make it, are we? Neri refused to answer, knowing the truth wouldn't help them now. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, her mind racing for a solution. Come on, you stubborn piece of junk, she muttered, coaxing the rust bucket like it was an old friend on its last legs. The ship groaned in response, its systems strained to the breaking point. But it held, and so did they. Just a little more, Neri urged, her eyes locked on the monolith as if sheer force of will could bend it to her demands. The custodian grid flickered again, the lines dimming like a light bulb on its last gasp. It was now or never. Ready? Raxel asked, though he knew the answer. Let's do this, Neri replied, heart in her throat but resolve unbroken. Together they made their final adjustments, the ship's systems screaming in protest. The monolith responded, its song rising to a fever pitch that seemed to echo through the universe itself. And then, like a miracle, the custodian grid collapsed, the lines of energy dissolving into nothingness. The path to the monolith's core lay open, unguarded and inviting. We did it, Raxel breathed, disbelief coloring his tone. For now, Neri replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The victory was fragile and they both knew it, but it was a victory all the same, and in a universe as unforgiving as theirs, that was a rare and precious thing. Come on, Neri said, gesturing towards the monolith. Let's see if we can make this thing do something useful. The path ahead was uncertain, the dangers far from over. But as they approached the monolith's core, the thrill of possibility buoyed their spirits. In the grand scheme of things, they might have been two insignificant specks against the vastness of space, but right now they had a chance to make a difference, and that was enough. As they reached the monolith, the symbols pulsed gently, a welcome of sorts. Neri touched the surface, feeling the hum of its energy beneath her fingertips. Ready to reprogram the universe? Raxel asked, a gleam of mischief in his eyes. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Neri replied, though her smile was genuine. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope flickered bright and fierce within her chest. The monolith's core awaited, a treasure trove of potential they were just beginning to unlock. And as they worked, the custodians' influence faded, their power receding like a tide. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they were closer than ever to achieving something that mattered. In a universe that cared little for their struggles, that was the greatest victory of all. Neri eyed the monolith's core like it was the universe's most dangerous game of operation. One wrong move, and they'd be toastier than a marshmallow in a supernova. But there was no room for hesitation. The custodian's defense grid might have crumbled, but the monolith still hummed with the kind of malevolent energy that probably had warning labels in a dozen alien languages. All right, let's crack this thing open like a cosmic piñata, Neri muttered, her fingers dancing over the datapad with the kind of dexterity usually reserved for bomb defusal experts or professional liars. Probably more of the latter. Raxel watched with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who just realized they were holding live dynamite. You ever get the feeling we might be in over our heads? He asked. Constantly, Neri replied, tapping the screen with the kind of determined frustration that usually involved swearing. But if I wanted to play it safe, I'd have stayed on Earth and taken up knitting. Knitting? Raxel raised an eyebrow. Never pegged you for the artsy type. Desperate times, desperate hobbies, Neri quipped, her eyes glued to the alien script that danced on the datapad. Now, unless you've got a better plan, let's see if we can make this monolith sing a different tune. Raxel glanced nervously at the monolith, its symbols glowing with a kind of ominous potential that spelled either salvation or annihilation. And by different tune, you mean one that doesn't end with us as cosmic roadkill. That's the dream, Neri replied, her fingers flying over the datapad as she tried to decipher the alien language. Let's just hope my linguistic skills are up to snuff. The monolith rumbled, its song shifting in pitch like a radio being tuned to just the right frequency, or the wrong one. Neri's heart skipped a beat, the skin on her arms prickling with tension as the alien script on the datapad morphed, twisting into something that almost resembled coherence. Look at that, she breathed, a grin spreading across her face. The symbols are aligning with Earth languages. Raxel peered over her shoulder, his eyes widening in disbelief. You're actually doing it. I mean, holy shit, you're really doing it. Don't sound so surprised, Neri shot back, though the triumph in her voice was undeniable. I did ace Ancient Languages 101. Sure, remind me again how many alien monoliths you translated back in college, Raxel asked, a sarcastic grin tugging at his lips. Just the one, she replied, her expression serious despite the banter. But it was a hell of a final exam. The monolith pulsed, the alien script stabilizing as Neri's inputs synced with its internal systems. The symbols on the monolith blazed with a new intensity, a radiant tapestry of knowledge waiting to be unlocked. This is it, Neri said, her voice a mixture of awe and conviction. We're on the brink of something huge. Yeah, Raxel agreed, though the weight of their task pressed heavily on his shoulders. Let's just hope it doesn't squish us like a bug. Their moment of triumph was interrupted by the sudden crackle of the comms, Sikar's voice breaking through the static like a lifeline. You two idiots still alive. Managed to isolate a signal. Custodians are pulling back. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Glad to hear you haven't given up on us yet, Sikar, Neri said, her fingers still working the datapad as she spoke. Any chance you can give us a heads up on what to expect next? Monolith's power core, significant energy spike, could stabilize the matrix, preserve Earth's languages. Sikar replied, the transmission clearer than before, though just as cryptic. Stabilize the matrix. Right, sounds easy as pie, Raxel muttered, casting a wary glance at the monolith. You got any tips for not getting vaporized in the process? Remain cautious. Custodians may have fallback measures, Sikar warned, his voice laden with the seriousness of someone who wasn't physically present to get blown up. Yeah, cautious is our middle name, Neri replied with a smirk. We'll keep our heads down and our fingers crossed. The comms went silent again, leaving them with a task that felt more like juggling chainsaws than anything else. But Neri had a plan, half-baked as it might have been, and that was better than nothing. Here goes nothing, she murmured, inputting the final sequence of commands into the datapad. The monolith's song changed, a new melody threading through the cavern, rich and complex like a symphony played by 1,000 instruments. The symbols on the monolith glowed brighter, their light filling the cavern like the dawn of a new age, or the prelude to an extinction event. Okay, I think we're good, Neri said, stepping back from the monolith with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The energy stabilized, the languages are preserved. We did it, Raxel. Yeah, we did, Raxel replied, though his voice was tinged with the kind of exhaustion that came with narrowly escaping doom. Now let's just hope the custodians don't change their minds and decide to nuke us from orbit. Optimist to the end, aren't you? Neri teased, though she felt the same lingering fear gnawing at her insides. Raxel shrugged, his expression half grin, half grimace. Hey, if we're gonna save the universe, we might as well do it with style. Agreed, Neri said, her smile triumphant despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. Now let's get the hell out of here before the custodians notice we've hacked their prize. As they turned to leave, the monolith's song faded, replaced by a gentle hum that almost felt like approval. It wasn't much, but in their line of work, a little cosmic pat on the back went a long way. Back at the rust bucket, they clambered inside, the ship's systems groaning to life with a kind of reluctant resignation that felt all too familiar. Think we've got enough juice to make it out of here? Neri asked, settling into the pilot's seat with the kind of practiced ease that belied her nerves. Let's find out, Raxel replied, flipping switches and toggles with the finesse of someone who had done this 1,000 times and knew exactly how many things could go wrong. The rust bucket shuddered, its engines roaring to life with a sound that suggested they'd need a serious tune-up once they were safely away from Alien. Next stop anywhere but here, Neri said, guiding the ship away from the cavern and the monolith that had nearly been their undoing. As they ascended, the planet's toxic atmosphere pressing in on them with the weight of 1,000 regrets, Neri allowed herself a moment of hope, a rare and dangerous luxury in their line of work. We did something good today, she said, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. Yeah, Raxel agreed, a hint of pride coloring his words. For once, it feels like we're not just treading water. The rust bucket broke through the toxic clouds, the stars beckoning them like friends from a forgotten past. A future awaited, a future they'd carved out against the odds, with nothing but stubborn determination and a healthy dose of sarcasm to guide them. We made a difference, Neri said, her gaze fixed on the stars as they left Alien behind. Sure, Raxel replied, a sly grin spreading across his face. Just don't expect me to make a habit of it. As the rust bucket surged into the void, leaving Alien far behind, Neri and Raxel shared a glance that said more than words ever could. They'd faced the impossible and emerged victorious, if a bit worse for wear. In a universe that rarely gave second chances, they'd seized theirs with both hands, and maybe, just maybe, they'd live to tell the tale. If not, they'd go down swinging, and in a cosmos as vast and uncaring as this one, that was the best anyone could hope for. And as they sailed into the cosmic unknown, their hearts buoyed by the thrill of survival and the promise of whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together, with a smile and a snark-laden quip at the ready. After all, in a universe full of darkness and despair, sometimes the best weapon was a sharp tongue and a refusal to back down. The rust bucket chugged through space like an asthmatic tortoise, but Neri and Raxel didn't mind. Sure, the engines sounded like they were about to give up the ghost at any moment, but the fact they were still breathing was a minor miracle worthy of at least a sarcastic toast. Neri leaned back in her seat, letting out a weary sigh as she looked over at Raxel. Well, I guess we didn't end up as cosmic dust, which is a nice change of pace. Maybe we should try surviving more often. Raxel chuckled, his fingers still dancing over the controls as he half-heartedly kept an eye on the ship's status. Yeah, I was getting tired of always being the universe's punching bag. Feels nice to punch back for once, and preserve humanity's languages while we're at it, Neri added, a smirk on her lips. Guess that makes us cultural heroes or something. Maybe they'll name a holiday after us. Don't Die in Space Day. Nah, too optimistic. Hope and Die Anyway Day has a better ring to it, Raxel shot back with a grin. They sat in companionable silence, the kind shared by those who'd been to hell and back and had the scars, emotional and otherwise, to prove it. The rust bucket screens flickered occasionally, reminding them that the old bird wasn't quite out of the woods yet. But for now, she was holding together, and that was all they could really ask for. So, what's next? Raxel asked, glancing over at Neri. After saving the universe and all, seems like everything else might be a bit of a letdown. Neri shrugged, staring out at the starry expanse. Dunno, maybe settle down somewhere less hostile. Open a bar, perhaps. The Black Hole Saloon. Get lost, have a drink, something catchy. With our luck, it'd be the first bar to get raided by space pirates, Raxel said dryly, or the drinks would explode. Or both, always the optimist, Neri snorted. But seriously, I think we've earned a little bit of peace and quiet, maybe even a vacation. Sure, if we find a planet that isn't trying to kill us, Raxel replied, flicking a switch that didn't appear to do much of anything. But hey, at least now we don't have the custodians breathing down our necks. That's gotta count for something. The comms crackled to life, interrupting their brief moment of levity. Sikar's voice filtered through the static, sounding as relieved as they felt. Just got word from Alien. Looks like the custodians are packing up. You two might have actually pulled it off. Neri couldn't help but grin. Well, what do you know, we did something right. Maybe we should buy a lottery ticket, assuming they have lotteries in whatever backwater planet we end up on, Raxel quipped. Seriously, what you did was impressive, Siccar continued, his tone more earnest than they were used to. The Traders Guild is already talking about new business ventures. The Miners' Union is too busy complaining about all the changes to notice they've got more opportunities now. Sounds like the universe is still in balance, Neri said. People griping, traders scheming, just the way it should be. Just don't expect the tech cultists to throw a parade, Siccar added. They're sulking because you outsmarted their precious machines. Wouldn't have it any other way, Raxel said with a shrug. As long as they don't try to recruit us into their creepy little club, my talents are wasted on cults, Neri said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Besides, I've got a reputation to uphold. The comms went silent again, leaving them alone with their thoughts and the gentle hum of the engines. Raxel looked over at Neri, a question in his eyes. So, what do you think? Did we really make a difference? Neri considered it for a moment before nodding. Yes, I think we did. We kept Earth's languages alive, fought off a bunch of homicidal robots, and didn't get turned into space debris. Not bad for a day's work. And we might have even made things better for the people on Alien, Raxel added. At least those who aren't trying to kill each other. A minor miracle in itself, Neri agreed. But hey, if we can do it, maybe there's hope for the universe yet. Raxel chuckled. Look at us, spreading hope and good cheer, like a pair of cynical, gun-toting Santas. Let's not get carried away, Neri said with a grin. We're just two idiots in a flying tin can, trying not to die. Sounds like the perfect job description, Raxel said, leaning back in his seat with a satisfied sigh. The rust bucket continued its journey through the stars, the faintest hint of optimism threading through the space between their words. It was a fragile thing, like a ship held together by duct tape and wishful thinking, but it was theirs. Hey, remember when we first got this thing? Raxel asked, a note of nostalgia in his voice. Thought she'd fall apart the moment we left the atmosphere. Still might, Neri said, glancing at a panel that was held in place by a stubborn piece of hope. But she's got character, like us. Old, creaky, and falling apart, Raxel asked with a laugh. Pretty much, Neri replied, her smile genuine. But somehow we keep going. The stars stretched out before them, a vast canvas of possibilities they'd never dared hope for. But now, with the custodians in retreat and humanity's knowledge safe, anything seemed possible. To the future, Raxel asked, raising an imaginary glass. To the future, Neri agreed, clinking her own imaginary glass against his. With that silent toast, they set their sights on the unknown. The universe was vast and unforgiving, but they were determined to carve out their own little corner of it, one sarcastic comment at a time. And as the rust bucket sailed into the infinite, leaving behind the chaos and the triumph of Alien, they knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together, with wit and grit and more than a little stubbornness. Because in a universe that seemed determined to crush them at every turn, they were the ones who refused to be crushed. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to make a difference. As the ship hummed softly through the void, Neri and Raxel shared a moment of quiet triumph. They'd fought the odds and won, and for a couple of rebels with questionable morals and a tendency to piss off everyone in charge, that was no small feat. So, Neri said, leaning back and feeling the tension of the last few days start to ebb away, what's next on our list of bad decisions? Raxel grinned, tapping at a flickering console. I hear there's a planet 2 systems over that serves the best synth whiskey this side of the galaxy. We could use a drink. Yeah, Neri replied, her eyes gleaming with mischief. And if someone ends up trying to kill us, it'll feel just like home. With a shared laugh and a steady course set for unknown adventures, Neri and Raxel sailed into the vast uncertainties of space, ready to face whatever the universe threw their way. And as the stars embraced them with their cold, indifferent light, they knew they'd be okay. After all, they had each other, an unshakable spirit of defiance, and enough snark to fill a black hole. In the end, maybe that was all anyone could ask for.